like to introduce the CEO of Quantum Genomics, Mr. Lionel Ségard. Thank you.
Thank you, Turs. I'm very pleased to be there today for this first KOL presentation about quantum genomics here in New York. Thank you very much for being there this morning. Quantum Genomics is a French biotech company. We founded the company about 10 years ago. We are listed in Paris Stock Exchange on Alternext. Ticker is ALQGC. And we have also received the Pass French Tech label for the French government. You know that Pass French Tech is a label that the French government is giving to so-called hyper-growth company. So we hope we will be successful and hyper-growth company, both in the US and in Europe. When I mention in the US, it's because our presentation today will introduce you the next clinical trials we plan to launch here in the United States. You have the usual disclaimer. As Turs told you, our agenda today, I will introduce you quantum genomics and the unique mechanism of action we are working on to develop our compound and launch our trials. Then you have Professor Henri Black, who will present you the management of hypertension, an overview from 25,000 feet. And Keith Ferdinand has accepted to join us today, coming from Tulane in New Orleans. Thank you very much, Keith, for being there. Thank you very much, Henri, as well. To talk about complicated and resistant hypertension in minorities. Then we will have a lunch break, as Turs told you, and Bruno Bess, our Chief Medical Officer, will present you our last results on QGC01. We've just disclosed those results last week in Milan during the European Society of Hypertension Congress. And following these results, he will introduce you the next trial we plan to launch here in the US, New Hope trial. That will be a large trial, and Professor Keith Ferdinand will be the PI for this study. And then we will have the panel discussion, and you will be able to ask everything you want to all the panelists. So Quantum Genomics' mission is to develop first-in-class cardiovascular drugs targeting unmet medical need, and our goal is to save lives of patients that are suffering from complicated hypertension. I will come back later on the patient we plan to treat with our drug. Few words about the management. I'm a former CEO of Inserm Transfer, which is a subsidiary of the French National Institute of Health and Medical Research, dedicated to large programs such as European programs, large trials, but also seed funding. As an investor, I invested in French companies such as Inet Pharma, for instance, that some of you know, or Take Cell, or IMU Pharma, which is listed on the EM. Our Chief Operating Officer, Jean-Philippe Milon, is a very experienced manager. He holds several management positions in the big pharmaceutical industry. He was head of the cardiovascular business at Sandoz, and then he joined Bayer, and he was head of the worldwide business development, license and merger and acquisition with Bayer, and member of the worldwide executive committee. He joined Quantum Genomics in order to help us to find the best partner to license our compound and to make it to market. Our goal as a company is not to sell directly our compound on the market, but to find the best partner to deal with the phase 3 trials and to launch a product on the market. Our Chief Financial Officer, Marc Caraco, who is sitting here, so if you have financial questions, feel free to ask him everything you need to know. He's a former Vice President and Chief Financial Officer with Carlson Wagonlit Travel, but also with several large companies such as Vallourec, who entered into the CAC 40 during Marc was there, Chief Financial and Legal Officer, and also Thomson Multimedia. Fabrice Balavoine is our Head of Research and Development. Fabrice is a great chemist. He did a very interesting school in France on chemistry, which is the ESPCI, sorry. And then he did his postdoc fellowship at Harvard Medical School, so he did a link between chemistry and medicine at that time. And Bruno Bess, of Chief Medical Officer, that will show you the result on our trials and discuss about our clinical plan. Bruno, who is a cardiologist by training, joined the company 3 months ago. Am I correct? And he is also graduated in biostatistics, so he's very, very aware of early stage clinical trials. He used to be a different position on research and development and medical affairs with big pharmaceutical companies such as Aventis and lastly Bristol Myers Squibb. So the company highlights, we, as I mentioned at the beginning, are developing a novel therapeutic class to treat cardiovascular diseases. We are targeting aminopeptidase at brain level, so BAPIs, brain aminopeptidase inhibitors, provide anti-hypertensive effect and cardioprotection. Targeting highly unmet medical need, strategy of the company is to target prevalent indications such as hypertension and chronic heart failure. Our clinical program, QGC01 on high blood pressure, we've just disclosed, as I mentioned, the phase 2A result in June last week at the ESH Congress in Milan, and we plan to launch a phase 2 here in the US. We have a program for heart failure, which is QGC101. It's a pan-European program. This trial is expected to be completed for the clinical part by the end of this year, and we plan to release the result by H1 2018. Of course, to support those development, we have a broad intellectual property portfolio with a lot of 6 patent families granted or filed, and that protect our compound up to 2033. I won't insist a lot on this figure, but we are a biotech company listed on Alternex, as I mentioned. Our main shareholders are family office, Alex, who has been a shareholder from the very beginning, and also Tethys, who belongs to the Bettencourt-Meyer family, which is the largest, the wealthiest family office in France and probably in Europe, also holding of L'Oréal. And the management has a bit more than 10% of the capital breakdown. The float is 33%, but in the float we have US investors and European investors and Asian investors, and also probably 30% that are retail investors. We did our IPO in 2015 in Paris, and we raised a bit more than 30 million euros, and our expenses to date at December 31, was 26.1 million, mainly research and development. So we have a bit more than 11 million euros at the end of 2016. Yeah. Key upcoming clinical milestones. So I mentioned the results of the phase 2A we've just disclosed. We plan to file the IND submission by July this year, and to launch the trial here in the US, the New Hope trial, by Q4 2017. To complete the clinical part of this study by the end of 2018, and have the result by H1 2019. And for heart failure, we have launched this trial and plan to complete the clinical part of this pan-European study by year-end 2017, have the result by H1 2018, and initiate phase 2B in 2019. Few words about the market. You know that those diseases, both high blood pressure and heart failure, are very important cause of death. You know that 17 million patients are dying every year due to cardiovascular disease. It's 1/3 of the people are dying due to those diseases. 1/3 of adults are suffering from high blood pressure. This proportion increases with aging to 50% when you are age 50 years old and more. And the number of patients suffering from high blood pressure is increasing due to the aging of population. You probably know it's more close to 10 million people that are dying every year due to the complications of high blood pressure. We name high blood pressure the silent killer, with a market, a global market, which is approximately 40 billion. And on heart failure, you know for sure that there are a lot of patients suffering from this chronic disease as well. So 23 million people suffering from this disease worldwide, and a survival rate which is very low, with 50% only of those patients that will survive within 5 years' time. So there is a significant need for patients to find new class of drugs, but there is also a significant need for big pharmaceutical companies. All those big pharmaceutical companies had blockbusters, such as Diovan, for instance, with Novartis, that made more than 9 billion sales per year. They are all facing the generic industry now, and they are working on combination, try to increase the number of patients that are well controlled with existing drug by having a better compliance to treatment with dual or triple combination, but nothing really new in terms of class of drugs to enter on those markets. Quantum Genomics is developing a novel therapeutic class, BAPI, that we plan to demonstrate that it's efficient for a specific category of patients. At ESH Congress, discussions were around how to increase the percentage of patients well controlled with existing drugs. And the goal from the European Society of Hypertension is to achieve 70% of control, 70%, 7-0. We are approximately at 40-45%, depending on the countries in Europe, control. So the goal is 70 because we know for sure that there are patients that are not responding to existing drugs. Catherine Lawrence-Cortez, who is within CERN, who is a neurobiologist, sorry about that, has discovered a pathway which is at brain level involved in the regulation of blood pressure. And she received the Prix Galien for her research in France for research. And she has demonstrated that at brain level there is a RAS system, renin-angiotensin system, and the peptide which is involved in the regulation of blood pressure is angiotensin 3. Angiotensin 3 so angiotensin 2 is converted into angiotensin 3 by the aminopeptidase. By inhibiting aminopeptidase, you're preventing the conversion of angiotensin 2 into angiotensin 3, decreasing the vasopressin level, the sympathetic nerve activity, and the baroreflex. So you have kind of a triple mechanism of action with one single drug. Targeting brain level, you also target heart, the vessels, and the kidney. Our development pipeline, we have 4 research and development programs based on this platform, BAPI platform. QGC01, I've already mentioned this one. We plan to launch the next trial here in the US this year. We are also working on a combination approach. We filed a patent that, because we've demonstrated that by inhibiting both renin-angiotensin system at peripheral level, but also at central level, you have a synergistic effect, especially with enalapril, for instance, which is an ACE inhibitor. And we are doing preclinical studies with this combination. We have also a common laboratory within CERN in the Collège de France, and working on best-in-class approach. The first one, QGC06, is 10 times more potent than QGC01 in vitro. And as I mentioned, we have our heart failure program, which is in phase 2A in Europe. So QGC01 for the treatment of hypertension. Prior to introduce Henri Black, I just want to mention, and you've seen the mechanism of action. I talk about renin-angiotensin system at central brain level, and I mentioned the vasopressin release, which is important in this mechanism of action. We can talk later about also heart failure and how important is the regulation of RAS at brain level, but also the sympathetic nerve activity for heart failure. But as far as hypertension is concerned, we plan to target low renin, high vasopressin patients with our drugs. Those patients, and we think that due to this specific mechanism of action, this unique mechanism of action, we think that this drug is a good fit for those patients. Those patients are approximately 30% of the total hypertensive population. This profile is overexpressed in elderly people, in Asian, in African descent and Hispanic population. And those patients are mostly suffering from uncontrolled or poorly controlled, I prefer to name it complicated hypertension. Some of them are fully resistant to existing drugs. Most of them are not well treated by existing drugs such as ACE inhibitor or ARBs. And we use, and Keith Ferdinand will talk about that later, drugs such as diuretics to try to decrease blood pressure in those patients. I think we will keep the question for the panel discussion, and I will leave the floor to Professor Henri Black to talk about the management of hypertension. Thank you very much.